Welcome to Sleepy Stories. Tonight we tell of Ragnar Lothbrok, a warrior whose battles shaped legends. His journeys across seas and his victories in far-off lands were fierce in life, yet here they are remembered like distant echoes, softened with time like waves washing over the shore. As you listen, the clashing of swords becomes a quiet rhythm, the cries of battle fade into whispers, and the story of Ragnar's courage will carry you slowly, gently toward rest. The Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok Part 1, The Boy Who Dreamed of Glory. Hear me and let the firelight dance upon your faces, for tonight I sing of Ragnar Lothbrok, the wolf among men, scourge of kings, and father of legacies. I tell you of a boy whose heart burned brighter than the forge fire, whose deeds grew larger than the mountains, whose name would travel farther than the gull upon the wind. The north in those days was wild and fierce. Fjords split the land like the scars of giants. Forests spread vast and endless, filled with whispering shadows, and the seas were hungry, their waves devouring ships as readily as they bore them to glory. Men lived by axe and plow, by spear and shield. Women kept hearth and sword alike, for in the north, all must fight when the wolves came. Above all, the gods watched. Odin with his single eye gleaming in secret, Thor's unseen hammer striking with each storm, Loki whispering cunning into mortal hearts. It was in such a world that Ragnar was born. The storm howled the night his mother screamed her labor. Winds battered the thatch roof, rattled the timbers, and howls of wolves echoed in the valley. The midwife trembled, for omens pressed heavy upon her shoulders. And when at last the child came forth, his cry burst like the roar of the sea, shaking rafters and silencing beasts beyond the hall. The seeress, old and crooked as driftwood, hobbled forward and laid her bony fingers on the infant's brow. Her eyes rolled back white, her lips murmured strange tongues, and then she spoke, her voice carrying like a raven's call. Open quote. This child shall rise on the storm. The north shall sing his name. Wolves shall fear him, kings shall curse him, and his sons shall carry his wrath across the sea. Close quote. The villagers gasped. Some crossed themselves, others spat to ward off doom. A child of such fate could bring prosperity or ruin. Yet as his tiny fist clenched, as his cry filled the hall like a horn of war, his mother whispered, Ragnar. From that day, the boy was marked. He grew quickly, as boys in the north must. Before he could walk, he crawled after his father's tools. Before he could speak, he mimicked the clang of sword on shield. His eyes, bright, sharp, too old for his face, watched men train in the yard, their wooden swords clashing, their shouts filling the air. He lingered at the skald's side when others ran off to play, his ears hungry for tales of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, Thor's battles with the giants, and Odin's sacrifice upon Yggdrasil. By 7 winters, he was strong enough to wield a spear. By 10, he had felled his first boar, earning meat for the village. By 12, he bested boys older than him in wrestling, his cunning sharper than his strength. He was fearless in a way that unsettled the elders. That boy, they muttered, has fire in his blood. Fire can warm the hearth or burn the hall. And indeed, the fire blazed. For by his 15th winter, Ragnar heard whispers of a beast haunting the forest. No common wolf or bear, but a shadow thing with eyes like molten gold and claws that tore trees as easily as flesh. Men returned from the woods bloodied or not at all. The villagers feared famine, for no one dared hunt the forest's heart. But Ragnar, with the boldness of youth and the weight of prophecy behind him, stood before the gathered folk and declared, open quote, if men will not face it, then I will. Shall we live as cowards, gnawed at by fear until the beast devours us all? No, I will strike it down or I will feed its hunger. Better to meet death with spear in hand than cower by the fire. Close quote. Gasps filled the hall. His father, or some say his uncle, or another guardian, for stories differ, gripped his arm. You are but a boy. The forest devours the unwary. But Ragnar only smiled. Then I shall be wary. I am no prey. That night he worked by firelight. He soaked his woolen breeches in tar, hardened them in sand and fire until they were stiff as armor. He sharpened his spear, muttering old prayers to Odin for wisdom and to Thor for strength. When dawn broke, mist heavy on the fields, Ragnar set forth alone. The forest swallowed him. Branches creaked, ravens croaked, and fog coiled thick around his legs. The air stank of blood and rot. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Hours passed, or was it moments, until a growl rolled through the trees, deep as thunder. Then it came. The beast burst from the gloom, taller than a man, with eyes burning like coals, fur matted with gore, claws long as knives. Its roar split the air, and its breath was foul with carrion. Ragnar's heart surged, not with fear, but with joy. "Come then," he shouted, gripping his spear. "Let us see whose fate the Norns favor." The creature lunged. Ragnar ducked, rolled, thrust his spear. The shaft struck hide, but the beast howled, snapping it in its jaws. It swiped, claws raking his arm, blood spraying. Ragnar leapt back, snatched his axe, and struck for its eye. The blow glanced, sparks flying as if steel met stone. Again and again they clashed, man and monster, blood-staining roots, snarls and shouts echoing through the wood. At last, Ragnar feinted left, then drove his axe up through the creature's throat. The beast shrieked, thrashed, and fell, its shadow dissolving into earth, its body crumbling like mist at dawn. Breath ragged, clothes torn, Ragnar staggered but did not fall. He seized what remained of the carcass, its skull heavy as iron, and dragged it back to the village. The people gathered, jaws slack, as he threw it at their feet. "Here," he said, bloodied but unbowed. "No beast will rule our woods while I draw breath." From that day, men called him Lothbrok, shaggy breeches, first in jest for his tar-hardened trousers, then in awe. The boy had become more than a boy. He had faced the darkness of the wilds and returned victorious. Thus begins Ragnar's climb. From bold youth to raider, from raider to king, from king to legend. The fire of his destiny was lit, and no sea nor serpent, no king nor curse could quench it. The Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, Part 2, The Making of a Raider. Hear me well, for the boy who slew the beast did not remain a boy for long. The skull of that shadow creature still lay by the hearth, a reminder to all who entered the village that Ragnar was not of ordinary flesh. Some whispered he had been touched by Odin himself, that the Allfather had stirred the fire in his heart. Others claimed Loki had planted cunning in his blood, for his eyes shone with schemes even when his lips were silent. Whatever the truth, it was clear. Ragnar was marked for more. Seasons passed, and Ragnar grew taller, broad of shoulder, and swift of limb. His hands hardened with callous, yet his mind sharpened, sharper still. When other youths were content to wrestle in the mud or chase deer with dull spears, Ragnar sat with old warriors, demanding to know how the shield wall was kept firm, how oars were driven in rhythm upon the sea, how sails were trimmed to catch the fickle wind. At night, he listened to tales not only of Sigurd and Thor, but of men who crossed the whale road in dragon-prowed ships. He heard of treasure-rich lands to the west, where the soil was soft, the towns fat, and the monks carried gold crosses too heavy for their spindly arms. He heard of kings who sat on jeweled thrones, their halls heavy with silver. His heart beat faster with each story, as though the waves themselves called his name. One evening, as smoke curled up from the hearth and the hall roared with laughter, Ragnar stood among the men and said, open quote, "Why do we sit idle when the seas open wide before us? Why plow the same fields, scrape the same soil, when beyond the horizon waits glory and treasure? We are wolves, yet we feed as dogs." Close quote. The men fell silent. Some chuckled, shaking their heads at the brashness of youth. But one old warrior, gray as ash, nodded slowly. "Bold words, boy. But bold words alone do not fill ships nor raise crews." Ragnar's eyes gleamed. "Then I shall fill them. I shall raise them. I will not wait until my hair is white and my back bent to chase my destiny. The Norns spin their threads now, and I will seize them before they are cut." The days that followed were filled with toil. Ragnar gathered what men he could. Some young like himself, hungry for fame, others poor farmers with little to lose, and even a few hardened warriors curious to see if the boy truly carried the favor of the gods. They felled trees and carved them into planks, hammering ribs and beams with care. The smell of pitch and sawdust filled the air. Ragnar worked among them, sweating as hard as any, his voice urging them on. "Strike truer. Fit it tighter. We build not a boat, but a beast of the sea, a dragon to carry us to glory." By spring's first thaw, the ship was ready. Long and narrow, with oars like talons and a carved dragon head upon the prow, its eyes painted red, it seemed less a vessel than a creature eager to bite the waves. Ragnar stood before it, his chest swelling with pride. "She shall be called Kraki's serpent," he declared, invoking the name of a hero long dead. The morning they set sail, the village gathered on the shore. Women wept, Children clung to their father's legs, elders muttered prayers to Njord and Aegir. Ragnar stood at the prow, cloak snapping in the wind, his hair bound tight, his axe gleaming. "Row!" he commanded, and the oars bit the water. The ship slid from the fjord into the vast, restless sea. Spray stung their faces, gulls wheeled above, and the men laughed, their hearts light with the thrill of the unknown. For days they sailed westward, the sun bright by day, the stars their map by night. Ragnar stood sleepless at the prow, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as though he could already see the lands of promise. Storms struck, waves crashed high, but he laughed into the wind. "Is this all you have, Aegir? Strike harder. I am not so easily drowned." At last, land rose from the mist, green fields, rolling hills, and a monastery's stone walls glinting in the morning sun. Bells rang faintly, voices chanted prayers, unaware of the storm that approached. Ragnar raised his axe high. "Brothers," he shouted, "here lies our feast. Let us take what is ours, and let the world learn the name Ragnar Lothbrok." With a cry, the men leapt ashore. The monks scattered, their faces pale, their prayers breaking into screams. Doors splintered beneath axes, treasures spilled from chests, silver chalices, golden crosses, jeweled books. The raiders filled their arms with plunder, laughter mingling with the clash of steel. Yet Ragnar's eye was not only on gold. He saw how the walls crumbled easily, how the men carried no weapons, how the land was soft and rich. He turned to his companions. "These lands are not guarded by warriors. They are ripe for wolves like us. Remember this, for today we take treasure, but one day we may take kingdoms." Bloodied and triumphant, they returned to their ship, sails heavy with loot. As the coast faded behind them, Ragnar stood tall at the prow once more, and the men, once doubting, now whispered with awe, "Truly he is favored of Odin. Truly the seeress spoke true." When they returned to the north, Ragnar's name spread like fire on dry grass. Villages spoke of his raid, halls rang with his daring. Some lords scowled, fearing his rising fame. Others sought his friendship, hoping to share in his glory. Skalds wove songs of the boy who had crossed the Whale Road and returned with riches, his breeches still tar-stiff, his axe still wet with blood. But Ragnar's hunger was not sated. He looked again to the horizon, where the sea rolled endless and the gods whispered promises of kingdoms yet unclaimed. Open quote, "This is but the beginning," he murmured to himself, hand resting on his axe. "The wolf has tasted blood, now he shall feast." Close quote. Thus Ragnar became not only a slayer of beasts, but a raider of coasts, a name to be feared in cloister and hall alike. The boy had become a man, the man a wolf, and the wolf a storm yet to come. The rise of Ragnar, love, war, and kingship. The sea had given Ragnar his first taste of glory, but the wolf was not yet full. No sooner had he returned to his homeland, his ship heavy with treasure, than word spread across the fjords and valleys. Men boasted of his daring, women whispered of his strength, and lords muttered of his growing fame. In the smoky halls, skalds sang of Ragnar, who crossed the Whale Road and brought back riches while others still dreamed by their hearths. Yet fate, woven by the Norns, does not spin glory without trial. For even as his name rose, challenges awaited, battles of the heart, battles of the sword, and battles against kings who feared his shadow. It was in those days that Ragnar first beheld Lagertha. Word came to him of a woman in Norway, a shield maiden of unmatched beauty and ferocity. She had fought beside men in the shield wall, her hair wild as flame, her eyes as sharp as the edge of her spear. Men called her a maiden of Freya, fierce as a she-wolf. Ragnar, hearing these tales, laughed and declared, open quote, "If such a woman exists, then she is worth more than gold. For silver may be spent, but a wife of valor will fight beside her man when the spears close in." Close quote. So he journeyed north, through forests thick with pine, until he came upon the hall of Lagertha. Outside he saw not only men but women training with sword and spear. Their shields shone, their laughter rang like steel on steel, and among them was Lagertha herself, tall and fair, her hair braided tight, her cloak clasped with a wolf's head of silver. She fought 2 men at once, her spear darting like lightning. Both fell, groaning in the dust, and she stood above them, smiling. Ragnar's heart thundered. He stepped forward. "Shield maiden," he called, "I am Ragnar, son of Sigurd Hring, though some say I am only a farmer's son. I care not. I have heard your fame, and I say this, I will not leave this hall until you are mine." Lagertha turned, her eyes cold as ice. And why should I wed a stranger who boasts like a scald with too much mead? If you wish to claim me, Ragnar, prove yourself. Wolves do not bow to lambs. Ragnar grinned. Then give me a trial worthy of a wolf. That night, Lagertha loosed her beasts upon him. From the shadows came a great bear, its roar shaking the hall, and beside it leapt a hound, jaws wide and teeth gleaming. Ragnar drew only a spear and a small shield. The hound leapt first. He braced, thrust, and the spear split the beast's throat. The bear reared, its paw lashing like Thor's hammer. Ragnar rolled aside, grabbed his axe, and with a shout struck deep into the beast's skull. Blood sprayed the hall as the bear toppled, dead at his feet. Breathing hard, Ragnar turned to Lagertha. Is that trial enough, or do you keep a dragon in your stables as well? For the first time, she laughed. Her laughter was like storm winds on the sea. You have courage, Ragnar, and wit as well. Very well. You have won me. So Ragnar took Lagertha as his wife, and together they were fierce. She a shield maiden, he a raider. Their hall rang with laughter, their fields with children's cries, and in battle they stood side by side, shield to shield, axe to spear. But peace is fleeting. A king of Sweden, Fro, sought to break Norway's power. He gathered his hosts and marched upon the land, taking captives and laying waste to villages. Word came to Ragnar, and though his men were few, his heart burned. He stood in the hall, his voice fierce. Shall we sit idle while Fro tramples our kin? No, if we are wolves, then let us bare our fangs. If the Norns have spun my fate, then let it be in battle, not in silence. Lagertha stepped beside him, her shield already upon her arm. Where you go, Ragnar, I go. If Fro seeks war, he shall find it. They rode to battle, Ragnar with his wolf-pelt cloak and Lagertha with her shining spear. The clash was terrible. Shields splintered, swords sang, and the air stank of blood and sweat. Ragnar fought like a storm, his axe cutting men down as stalks of wheat, yet the tide turned against him until Lagertha leapt into the fray, her spear flashing like lightning. 3 men fell before her, then 5 more, her cry fierce as a hawk's. The men, seeing her courage, rallied and drove the Swedes to rout. When the battle ended, Ragnar stood, blood running down his arms, and looked upon his wife. You are worth 10 kings, Lagertha, he said, awe in his voice. And thus Fro was defeated, and Ragnar's fame grew greater still. Men whispered that Odin's eye watched him closely, that Thor lent him his strength, and that Freya herself had blessed his union with the Shield Maiden. Yet even heroes are not free from strife. Though Ragnar and Lagertha shared battle and laughter, their hearts did not remain bound. Quarrels rose, pride clashed with pride, and though they loved fiercely, they parted with equal fire. Ragnar returned to Denmark, where other fates awaited, while Lagertha ruled her lands with spear and shield. It was then that Ragnar turned his gaze outward once more, not only across the sea, but across the thrones of the north. His father Sigurd Hring had died, and though Ragnar's claim was disputed, men looked to him with hope. For who else had raided the west? Who else had slain a beast with bare hands, won a shield maiden with wit and axe, and humbled a Swedish king? Ragnar gathered his men and stood upon a hill, the wind whipping his cloak. Now begins a new chapter. The sea has given me plunder, the spear has given me victory, and the Norns have given me fate. I will not rest until the crowns of Denmark and Sweden are mine. Let every king who hears my name tremble, for Ragnar Lothbrok rises, and he shall not fall. The Sons of Prophecy, Aslog and the Weaving of Fate. After parting from Lagertha, Ragnar's hall felt colder, though its hearth still burned. The laughter of warriors rang in the rafters, the clashing of mead cups echoed in the night. Yet Ragnar's thoughts wandered. He had tasted glory, conquered foes, and shared a bond with a shield maiden whose courage equaled his own. Yet the Norns had not finished with him. They whispered of another path, a woman unlike any other, whose fate would entwine with his like roots of the world tree itself. Her name was Aslog, though in her youth she was called Kraka. She was the daughter of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and Brynhild the Shield Maiden, born of fire and doom. Yet she grew in secret, hidden away, for her parents' death had left her vulnerable. She was raised by peasants in Norway, clothed in rags, her beauty concealed, her true heritage buried. But even hidden, fate shines through rags like gold beneath ash. Her hair flowed long and fair, her eyes were keen as Odin's ravens, and her mind was sharp with wisdom. The peasants called her Kraka, Crow, for she cloaked herself in humble garb, but her spirit was that of a swan. It was on a summer's morning that Ragnar first heard of her. He had sailed once more across the whale road, raiding and plundering, and on his return he stopped by the peasants' lands to feed his men. There he heard whispers of a maiden so fair that none dared look too long upon her. Ragnar, curious, sent messengers to fetch her, but he was no fool. Many kings had been tricked by beauty alone. So he set a test, for cunning pleased him as much as a fair face. "Tell the maiden," he said, "that she must come to me neither clothed nor unclothed, neither hungry nor full, neither alone nor in company." The messengers carried his riddle, thinking to shame her. But Aslog only smiled, her mind swift as the wind. She wrapped herself in a fishing net, so she was neither clothed nor unclothed. She bit into an onion, so she was neither hungry nor full, and she walked with only her dog at her side, so she was neither alone nor in company. When Ragnar beheld her, his breath caught. She stood before him radiant, the sun glinting on her hair, her poise regal despite the net about her. His men muttered in awe, for none had expected such beauty or such wit. Ragnar himself laughed aloud, striking his knee. "By Odin's beard, you are cleverer than any skald, fairer than Freya's maidens, and bold enough to face my trickery. Tell me, what is your name?" "They call me Kraka," she said softly, "but names are only cloaks, and cloaks may be cast aside." Ragnar's eyes narrowed, sensing the depth in her words. He pressed no further, though the question gnawed at him. He took her to his hall, and soon she lay at his side. She bore him sons, strong, fierce, and strange in their destinies. First came Ivar, whom men would call boneless. His legs were weak, twisted at birth, and the women wept to see him. Yet Ragnar, holding the child in his arms, spoke, "Do not pity him. The gods do not shape a man's legs. They shape his heart, his mind, his will. Ivar will be greater than any of my sons. He will conquer with wisdom where others use only steel." Next came Bjorn Ironside, broad-shouldered and strong, a boy whose skin seemed harder than other men's, as if the gods had clothed him in armor before he was weaned. He grew restless as a cub, forever reaching for sword and shield before he could walk properly. Then came Hvitserk, fair-haired and fearless, quick to laugh in the face of danger, and Sigurd, snake in the eye, born with a mark in his eye, a serpent coiled within the pupil. At his birth the seeress gasped and whispered, "The worm's gaze is upon him, great deeds shall spring from his line." Aslog bore these children in wisdom, guiding them with words that often seemed as though they came not from her lips but from the Norns themselves. She would say to Ragnar, "Do not think only of raiding and kingship. Our sons are seeds. Plant them well, and they will grow into oaks that shall shake the earth long after we are dust." But Ragnar, though he admired her counsel, was restless. Fame burned in him as fire in dry grass. He longed for greater conquests, for lands beyond the horizon, for deeds that would outshine the tales of his ancestors. Still, he could not ignore the power of Aslog. She matched him not with sword, but with wit and foresight. Many said she was touched by the gods, that Brynhild's blood in her veins carried the wisdom of Valkyries. One evening, as the mead hall roared with feasting, Ragnar turned to her. "Tell me, Kraka, if that is your name still, what fate do the Norns weave for me? Shall I be king of Denmark alone, or shall my name echo in far-off lands?" Aslog met his gaze calmly. "You will be more than king, Ragnar. The sea will be your road, the world your hall. Kings shall fear you, and your sons will carry your banner farther still. But beware, fate is not kind to those who chase glory without heeding its cost. A man may grasp gold and crowns, yet lose all that his heart holds dear." Ragnar frowned, but said no more. In truth, her words unsettled him, yet in his pride he believed no fate could chain him. As the years passed, Ragnar's sons grew tall, their names spreading across the north. Ivar's mind sharpened like a blade, cunning in all matters of war. Bjorn proved himself in raids, his strength unmatched. Hvitserk and Sigurd were bold, their courage lighting every battlefield. And Aslog, wise as ever, kept their house strong, ruling in Ragnar's absence when he sought glory abroad. But whispers stirred. Some lords grumbled that Ragnar had cast aside Lagertha, the fierce shield maiden, for a peasant's daughter. Others muttered that Kraka was not who she seemed, and in time the truth would be revealed, shaking Ragnar's hall and altering the course of his destiny. Ragnar's hall changed when Aslog came to it. Where once the long benches rang only with laughter and steel, there was now also the quiet counsel of a woman whose eyes saw further than most men's. She was unlike Lagertha. Lagertha had been a tempest, fierce and immediate, the crash of waves upon the rocks. Aslog was the deep sea itself, calm upon the surface but full of unseen power, concealing storms in her depths. The sons she bore were unlike any Ragnar had fathered before, for each seemed to carry a mark of the other world. Ivar, though his legs were withered, had a presence that unsettled even grown warriors. When he fixed his piercing blue eyes upon them, men shifted uncomfortably as if he could see into their hearts and weigh their secrets. As a boy, he asked questions no child should think of. "Father," he once said, why do kings cling to their crowns when crowns only make men bleed?" Ragnar chuckled, stroking his beard. "Because, Ivar, men are hungry for glory, and glory demands a throne." "And what if I do not need legs to take a throne?" the boy replied. The hall fell silent at such words. Ragnar only smiled faintly, but in his heart he felt the stirrings of awe and perhaps a touch of fear. Bjorn, in contrast, was the embodiment of strength. From the time he could walk, he sought combat. At 7 years, he wrestled boys older and larger, never yielding. At 10, he killed a wolf with a spear he had crafted himself. His skin bore scars, yet each seemed only to harden him further. The people whispered that no weapon could pierce him, that the gods had set iron within his flesh. Vitzurk grew into a flame-hearted youth, forever laughing, forever reckless. He leapt into danger with joy rather than caution, and when others trembled, he roared in delight. He was beloved in the hall, for his spirit lifted even weary men after long raids. Yet Aslog sometimes watched him with sorrow in her eyes, for she knew that reckless fire burns brightest before it consumes itself. And then there was Sigurd, the last of her sons by Ragnar. From birth, his serpent's eye marked him, a thing both wondrous and terrifying. When he looked upon men, they swore they could feel the serpent move, as though it slithered within his skull. Skalds spoke in hushed tones of the prophecy tied to his line, that the serpent in his eye would mirror the serpent of Midgard, whose coiling one day would end the world. Aslog raised them not only with food and shelter, but with words of power. She told them tales of their grandfather Sigurd, who slew the dragon Fafnir, and of Brynhild, their grandmother, who had been both shield maiden and sorceress. She did not hide their lineage, though Ragnar still believed she was but Kraka, the daughter of peasants. When Ragnar was away raiding, she sat by the fire, weaving tales into their ears. "Remember," she told them, "you are not only sons of Ragnar, you are of Sigurd's blood. His fire runs in you. But beware, for fire can warm a hall or burn it to ashes. The choice will be yours." In time, word of her wisdom spread. Men began to question, how could a mere peasant girl possess such knowledge, such grace, such presence? Envy grew in Ragnar's hall. Some whispered that she was a witch, others that she had bewitched Ragnar himself. It was not long before the truth began to claw its way to the surface. One morning, as the dawn mist clung to the fjords, Ragnar prepared to lead another raid. His men were sharpening axes when a group of nobles approached him. They bowed, but their voices carried bitterness. "Lord Ragnar," one said, "you are the greatest warrior in the north. Your fame carries beyond the seas. Yet what woman sits at your side? A peasant's daughter, raised in rags. Is it fitting that such a one should be mother to your heirs? Should the sons of Ragnar not be born of royal blood?" Ragnar's jaw tightened. His pride was stung, though he had loved Aslog well. Yet the words struck a chord, for in his restless heart he still longed for greatness, for alliances that might further his ambition. That evening he came to Aslog, who sat weaving by the fire, her long hair falling like rivers of gold. He spoke bluntly, as was his way. "Kraka," he said, "men murmur in my hall. They say you are unfit to be my wife, that my sons should be born of royal blood. I have given thought to it, and I cannot deny their counsel. I must take another wife, one whose lineage strengthens my rule." The hall seemed to darken with his words. Aslog looked up slowly, her eyes steady, her hands unmoving upon the loom. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice calm as a winter lake, she replied, "You speak of lineage, Ragnar, yet you do not know mine. You have called me Kraka, the crow in rags. But I tell you this, I am Aslog, daughter of Sigurd Fafnisbane and Brynhild the Shield Maiden. In my veins runs the blood of dragon slayers and Valkyries. You cast me aside, and you cast aside a destiny greater than your own." Ragnar staggered back as if struck. His eyes widened. The hall erupted in gasps and murmurs. Never had he suspected such a truth, though deep in his heart he recalled the riddle she had solved and the wisdom she carried. You are Sigurd's daughter?" he breathed. Aslog rose to her feet, tall and radiant, her presence filling the hall. "I am, and the sons I have given you carry his blood, mingled with yours. They are not the spawn of a peasant, they are heirs of heroes. The Norns wove us together, Ragnar. Do not cut the thread." For a moment, silence reigned, heavy as storm clouds. Then Ragnar laughed, not in mockery, but in wonder. He struck his knee and cried, "By Thor's hammer, I have been blind. I sought to cast aside a jewel, thinking it a pebble. Truly, Aslog, you are more than worthy, and my sons more than blessed. Let no man in my hall call you peasant again, or I will carve his tongue from his mouth." From that day, Aslog was no longer Kraka, the crow in rags. She was Aslog, queen of Ragnar's hall, mother of kings to come. The men who had doubted her bowed their heads in shame, for none could deny her heritage or her wisdom. Yet with this revelation came new weight upon Ragnar's shoulders. For if his sons were born of such a union, then surely their fates would be mighty and terrible. The seeress's words at his own birth echoed in his mind, "His sons shall carry his wrath across the sea." And so the Hall of Ragnar grew ever more a place of prophecy and shadow, where every deed seemed touched by the hand of fate. Ragnar's hall swelled with pride and unease in equal measure. His sons grew like wolves, each with their own mark of greatness. His queen no longer hid her true name, and men whispered that Ragnar's household was no mere mortal dwelling, but a nest where the gods themselves tested the strength of men's hearts. Yet Ragnar himself was restless. To sit idle while the fjords echoed with others' victories was no way for the wolf of the north. His fame burned bright, but he hungered for more, for deeds that would be sung not only by the Northmen, but by kings and skalds across the wide world. One spring, as the ice melted and the rivers freed themselves, Ragnar stood upon the high cliffs and gazed across the endless sea. The gulls wheeled above him, shrieking as if mocking his stillness. Floki, his shipbuilder and companion of strange humor, came to stand at his side. "You stare at the waves as though they hide secrets, Ragnar," Floki said, his grin crooked. "Do you see land out there, or only your own restless heart reflected in the water?" Ragnar narrowed his eyes against the sun. "I see kingdoms fat with gold and trembling kings who have not yet learned the wolf's howl. I see shores beyond these waves, rich with plunder, waiting for those who dare." Floki laughed softly, his eyes gleaming. "Ah, then we must build ships that dare more than the sea has yet endured, long and swift with dragon prows to strike fear before a blade is ever raised, ships that fly upon the waves like gulls upon the wind." "Then build them," Ragnar said, his voice low but fierce. "Build me ships that carry not just men but destiny itself." Word spread quickly through the north. Ragnar was to raid again, but not as he had before. No mere coastal village or neighboring lord would feel his fury. His eyes turned west across the open sea toward the kingdoms of England. The skalds whispered of its fertile fields and fat monasteries, undefended and rich with silver. To the Northmen, it was a dream waiting to be claimed. When the day came, the longships slid from their cradles like beasts unleashed. Their dragon heads gleamed, their sails billowed crimson and black. Ragnar stood at the prow, cloak whipping in the salt wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. His sons, though still young, watched with awe as the ships vanished into the vastness, carrying their father and his chosen warriors into legend. Days at sea tested them. The waves rose like mountains and storms struck without warning. Yet Floki's ships held strong, their curved hulls dancing with the swell. The men sang to keep fear at bay, their voices raw against the roar of the wind. Ragnar himself laughed when thunder cracked overhead. "Thor blesses our voyage," he cried. "Let the storm rage, for the gods themselves clear our path." At last, England rose from the mist, green and golden beneath the summer sun. Villages lay unguarded, their people unprepared for the storm that fell upon them. The Northmen descended like wolves, axes flashing, shields smashing, voices howling in savage joy. Churches, heavy with silver and gilded books, were plundered. Monks fled or fell, their prayers drowned by the clash of steel and the roar of Ragnar's warriors. In one such monastery, Ragnar strode through the smoke and ruin. Gold and chalices glittered in the firelight. He seized a great cross of silver and laughed, holding it high. "See how these kings of Christ hide their wealth in wooden halls, guarded not by warriors, but by scribes," he shouted. "Their God may guard their souls, but he guards not their silver." The men roared in approval, their sacks heavy with plunder. Ragnar's fame grew with each raid. The name Lothbrok, Shaggy Breeches, spread across England, carried by survivors who trembled to speak of him. Yet Ragnar hungered still. Raiding villages and monasteries was but the beginning. His eyes turned to kings, for only by toppling rulers could he prove himself more than a mere raider. He sought battles where the outcome would shape not only his fate, but the fates of kingdoms. The Anglo-Saxon lords grew fearful. One by one, they sent armies to drive him back into the sea. Yet Ragnar, cunning as Loki, bold as Thor, struck where they were weakest. He split his forces, lured men into ambush, and vanished like smoke upon the wind, only to strike again miles away. His wolf-pack tactics left whole regions in terror, unsure when or where the next blow would fall. One evening, after a great victory, Ragnar sat by the fire with his men. The loot of England glittered around them, but Ragnar's face was thoughtful. Bjorn, though still young, noticed and asked, "Father, why do you look troubled? We have silver, cattle, slaves, more than any other band of raiders." Ragnar looked at his son, the firelight dancing in his keen eyes. "Because, Bjorn, I seek more than silver. I seek a kingdom. Raids are but sparks, and sparks fade, but a kingdom burns forever, if held with strength." Bjorn's eyes widened, and the men murmured. Some thought him mad, others felt the stirrings of awe. For in Ragnar's voice was not the hunger of a raider, but the ambition of a king. And so the saga deepened. The wolf of the north had crossed the sea and found the sheep of Christ's lands easy prey. But Ragnar was no longer content with flocks. He sought the shepherds, the crowned lords, the thrones themselves. The gods watched with silent eyes, as they had on the night of his birth. Odin's ravens circled, and in the shadows of fate, the Norns wove their threads tighter. The wolf had crossed into new hunting grounds, and soon kings would learn to fear his howl. The first raids upon England were but sparks, bright in the night and quickly gone, yet sparks have a way of finding dry tinder. What began as the plundering of a few coastal villages soon grew into a blaze that reached the halls of kings and bishops. The Northmen's longships, swift as serpents, came without warning. They struck at dawn when the mists lay thick on the rivers, or at night when the bells of churches tolled in vain. Monks fled from burning cloisters, peasants abandoned their fields, and the air was filled with the smoke of ruin. To Ragnar and his men, England was a land rich beyond measure. Its soil was fat and soft, not the stony ground of the north. Its rivers carried not only fish but trade, and its villages yielded cattle, grain, silver, and slaves. It was a land of abundance, guarded by kings who argued more with one another than with their enemies. Yet word of Ragnar's fury spread. From the chalk cliffs of Wessex to the strong halls of Northumbria, men spoke his name with dread. Priests warned their flocks that the Northmen were a scourge sent by God to punish sin. Kings called councils, gathering their ealdormen and thanes in smoky timber halls. There, beneath banners of the cross, they argued long into the night. "Send more men to the coast," cried one. "Call on our allies," urged another. But always the same fear returned. Who can stand against the wolf from the sea? Ragnar was cunning. He never lingered in one place. His ships were like ghosts, seen one day upon the Thames, the next upon the Humber, then gone as quickly as a dream. Villages burned, but when the feared gathered, the raiders had vanished, leaving only charred beams and scattered bones. One night, when the torches still glowed from a raid, Ragnar stood before his warriors. His breeches, stiff with salt and blood, clung to him like a second skin. He looked upon his men, farmers turned raiders, sailors turned wolves, and he smiled that grin which made even the bravest tremble. "These kings think us thieves," Ragnar said, his voice carrying above the crackle of flames. "They believe we come to steal their silver, their cattle, their women. But we do not steal. We take what is owed. Did not Odin claim wisdom with an eye? Did not Thor wrestle giants for the safety of men? So shall we take from these kings who grow fat while the north starves. Let them fear our sails upon the horizon, for we are the storm made flesh." The men roared, striking shields with axe and sword. Sparks flew upward like the stars themselves, and the sound was like thunder rolling across the sea. But not all Ragnar's dealings were with axe and fire. He was no fool who believed terror alone could build a kingdom. At times, he sent envoys to certain lords, offering peace for silver or alliance for oaths. Some bent their knee willingly, seeing profit in friendship with the wolf. Others feigned loyalty while plotting betrayal. Ragnar welcomed both, for he knew treachery was as common to kings as salt to the sea. It was not long before the kingdoms of England set aside their quarrels and gathered their strength. From Mercia, from Northumbria, from Wessex, banners rose, knights mustered, and priests blessed the spears of war. At last a great host formed, greater than any Ragnar had yet faced. A sea of helmets and shields, their standards flying in the cold wind. Upon a hill, Ragnar watched them, his men arrayed below, fewer by far, yet fierce in their hunger. Floki, his face smeared with ash, leaned near with that crooked grin. "They are as many as the stars, Ragnar. Shall we not slip away as foxes do and live to raid again?" Ragnar's eyes burned, the fire of Thor and the cunning of Loki within them both. Foxes steal scraps, Floki. Wolves take the herd, and a wolf does not flee from the flock, he strikes at its throat. He raised his spear so that the sun caught its tip, and his voice thundered over the shield wall. "Men of the north, Odin watches. Let him judge this day who is worthy. If we fall into song. If we triumph as lords. Stand with me and let the Saxon kings learn that the sea has no master." The cry that followed shook the earth. Shields locked, axes raised, the Northmen advanced. The clash was like thunder made flesh. Spears shattered, swords rang, shields split beneath the force of blows. The English pressed hard, their ranks deep and many, their knights armored and mounted. The shield wall bent beneath the weight, and for a time it seemed Ragnar would be drowned in the tide. But Ragnar was no common warrior. With guile born of Loki's whisper, he ordered a retreat. The Northmen fell back, step by step, until the English knights surged forward in pursuit. Their hooves struck marshy ground hidden by reeds. Horses stumbled, knights toppled, and in that chaos, Ragnar's wolves turned. With a howl they fell upon the struggling foe, axes biting deep, spears thrusting, blades red with slaughter. The river itself seemed to groan with the blood that fed it. Those who fled were cut down. Those who stood were overwhelmed. By nightfall, the English host lay broken, their banners trampled in the mud. Ragnar stood amidst the ruin, his axe heavy with gore, his laughter carrying far into the dark. That night, when the fires of victory still glowed, Ragnar spoke softly to his closest men. "Today we broke their army. Tomorrow we break their kings. England will learn our name, and in their churches they will curse it." Yet while Ragnar carved his path abroad, Aslog at home dreamed dreams that chilled her heart. By the hearth she saw visions in the smoke, serpents coiling, pits yawning, venom dripping. When Ragnar returned, she took him aside, her gaze deep as the night sea. "You win glory, husband, but I see doom walking beside you. You are the wolf, and wolves are feared. But beware the pit, Ragnar. Beware the venom that coils unseen." Ragnar frowned, though her words struck like a hidden spear. "A wolf does not fear serpents." "No," Aslog replied, her voice low, "but even wolves fall when bitten in the dark." Still, Ragnar pressed on. Each season brought new raids, each raid greater spoils. His fame swelled like the tide, and fame, as the skalds say, is a double-edged sword. To some, he was hero and king of the sea, to others a scourge to be destroyed no matter the cost. And now his sons were no longer children. Bjorn, broad of shoulder, his skin hard as iron, came before his father with fire in his eyes. "Let me stand beside you in the shield wall," he said. "I am no boy to sit by the fire while men sing of your glory. I will prove myself as your son." Ragnar studied him long, then nodded. "Very well," Bjorn Ironside. "Let the Saxons feel your strength." So Bjorn joined the raids. Men marveled at him, for no blade seemed to pierce his skin, and no foe could withstand his blows. He fought like a storm-given flesh, and his name spread across the sea as swiftly as his father's. Thus the sons of Ragnar began to walk their own paths, even as the Norns spun tighter the web that would one day ensnare them all. The victory in the marsh was not the end, but the beginning. Ragnar knew this well. Kings could lose a battle and yet remain kings, so long as their thrones still stood and their crowns were unbroken. To truly master England, Ragnar would have to do more than burn villages and scatter armies. He would have to strike at the heart, at the lords who claimed the land and the crowns that bound men to their oaths. In the smoky halls of Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex, word spread of the wolf from the sea. Priests called councils, their Latin prayers mingling with the harsh tongues of warlords. Banners were unfurled, messengers rode by moonlight, and for the first time in many winters, the Saxon kings looked beyond their quarrels with one another and fixed their gaze upon the same foe. In Wessex, King Ethelwulf sat beneath the carved beams of his hall, his face troubled. Around him, his ealdormen argued. "They are demons, lord," one declared, his knuckles white upon the hilt of his sword. "They come like the storm, with fire and slaughter. We must meet them with steel." Another shook his head. "Steel alone will not suffice. These Northmen are cunning. Today they raid our coast, tomorrow they strike our rivers. Their ships glide where our armies cannot follow. We must buy them off. Pay them in silver, turn their sails elsewhere." The hall erupted, some voices clamoring for war, others for tribute. King Ethelwulf raised his hand, silencing them. "We will summon all men who owe us oaths," he said, "and we will pray that God's hand shields us, for if he does not, no shield of wood or iron will stand." Far to the north, in the stone halls of Bamberg, King Ella of Northumbria spoke with his council. His eyes were hard, his voice like ice. "I will not buy peace with silver," Ella said. "To yield is to invite more wolves to our door. No, this Ragnar will learn that Northumbria is no field of sheep to be taken at his pleasure. I will break him, and when I do, I will make such an end of him that no Dane will dare set foot upon my shores again." Thus oaths were sworn, armies raised, and the stage set for a great reckoning. Meanwhile, Ragnar returned to Denmark, his ships heavy with plunder. His people cheered, his warriors feasted, and his fame burned brighter than the sun. Yet Aslog, his queen, watched with eyes that saw beyond the revel. By the hearth fire, her dreams grew darker. She dreamed of serpents coiling in a pit, of venom dripping from fangs, of Ragnar standing proud, though death circled him. She spoke her fears when they were alone. "Beware the snake, Ragnar. Beware the pit. Glory is a sweet song, but even the song of a skald ends. The gods do not love a man forever." Ragnar only smiled, though her words clung to him like shadow. "If the gods wish to end me, let them. But until that day comes, I will carve my name upon the bones of kings." His sons, now growing into men, gathered at his side. Bjorn Ironside, tall as an oak, unyielding as iron. Hvitserk, reckless and bold. Sigurd, snake in the eye, marked with the serpent in his gaze. And young Ivar, his legs weak, yet his mind sharp as Odin's spear. One evening, Bjorn stood before Ragnar, his hands upon the table, his voice fierce. "Father, I have watched long enough. You raid, you burn, you win glory, while I linger as a child. No more. I would fight beside you, and England shall know not only the father, but the son." Ragnar studied him, pride in his eyes. "Very well, Bjorn. You shall come, and the Saxons shall feel the weight of Ironside's hand." Thus Bjorn sailed with Ragnar on the next campaign. Together they crossed the Whale Road, their dragon-prowed ships cutting swift as knives across the grey sea. When they landed, it was not upon a village, but upon the very heart of Northumbria. Ragnar sought not cattle or silver now, but crowns. Ella met him with a great host, drawn from all corners of his realm. The plain shook with the tread of men, the clang of steel, the neigh of horses. Ragnar's men, though fewer, locked shields and raised their voices to the gods. The battle was long and fierce. Saxon knights thundered against the shield wall, their lances splintering upon northern wood. Arrows darkened the sky. Ragnar fought like a man possessed, his axe red with blood, his laughter ringing above the din. Beside him, Bjorn carved a path of ruin, blows glancing from him as if his very skin were forged of iron. The Saxons pressed hard, but Ragnar's cunning turned the tide. He feigned retreat once more, luring Ella's knights into marsh and mire, where their horses stumbled and their formation broke. Then the wolf turned, and the slaughter was great. That night, by the light of burning halls, Ragnar stood beside his son. "Now you are a man, Bjorn Ironside," he said. "The sagas will carry your name. But fate is a net the Norns weave, and even the mightiest warrior cannot cut its threads." Though Ragnar triumphed in battle, Ella did not yield. He swore vengeance, swore he would not rest until Ragnar lay broken. And across the sea, in Wessex, Ethelwulf gathered his strength, calling upon the favor of God to strike down the heathens. The storm was far from over. It had only begun to rise. The years passed, and Ragnar's name became as thunder across the Whale Road. Kings cursed him in their halls, priests wailed his name in their prayers, and skalds sang of his deeds until their voices cracked. Yet with every victory, every burning hall, every crown humbled, Ragnar felt the pull of fate. He grew restless, as wolves do when the herd grows scarce. The feasts, the silver, even the cheers of his people, these no longer filled him. He longed for something greater, something final, a deed so mighty that it would echo when his bones were dust. One winter night he sat by the fire in his hall, his sons and jarls around him. The torches spat smoke, and the mead ran thick as honey. Yet Ragnar's eyes were distant. At last he spoke. Men speak my name in every kingdom of the north. They speak it in Francia, where I scaled Paris's walls. They speak it in England, where I slew their hosts and set fire to their churches. And yet, he paused, staring into the flames. And yet I feel my name is not yet carved deep enough into the world. One last raid, my friends, one last voyage to England. I will go with only a few ships, and I will show those kings that Ragnar Lothbrok needs no great host to bring them to their knees. The hall murmured, some voices eager, others troubled. Floki leaned forward, his grin crooked as ever. A small fleet? Madness, which is why I love it. Bjorn frowned. Father, you tempt fate. You have sons now, an empire to guard. Why risk all on a raid with but a handful of men? But Ragnar only laughed, the sound harsh and wild. Because, Bjorn Ironside, it is better to die as a wolf than live as a sheep. That night, as the hall slept, Aslog dreamed once more. She saw Ragnar standing upon a pit, writhing with serpents, their fangs gleaming like swords, their hisses louder than thunder. She woke with a cry, the vision burning her heart. In the morning, she took Ragnar aside. I saw your death, husband. I saw the pit. I saw the snakes. I saw your blood staining their scales. If you go, you will not return. Ragnar placed his hands upon her shoulders, his eyes fierce but calm. Do you think me blind, Aslog? I, too, have felt it. The Norns tug at my thread. But better to meet my fate boldly than hide from it like a coward. Aslog's voice trembled. And what of your sons? What of the vengeance they will bear? They will carve a storm greater than any I have made, Ragnar said, like my death will be their fire. So it was that Ragnar gathered only 2 ships, a mere handful compared to the fleets he once commanded. He chose only the fiercest of his warriors, men who would follow him into hell itself. They crossed the Whale Road once more, the salt spray cold on their faces, the prows biting the waves like dragons hungry for prey. But the Saxon kings had long prepared. Word spread swift as gulls upon the wind. King Ella of Northumbria, still burning with vengeance, swore an oath that this time Ragnar would not escape. Messengers sped to Wessex, Mercia, and beyond. Priests blessed the spears, bells rang in towers, and men gathered like storm clouds. When Ragnar landed, it was no quiet raid upon a village. Armies awaited him, shields bristling, banners flapping like wings of ravens. His men looked upon the hosts arrayed before them, and some grew pale. One young warrior muttered, "There are too many, Lord, too many to fight. We are but 2 ships against a sea of shields." Ragnar raised his head, his wolf fur cloak heavy upon his shoulders, his eyes burning with the light of fire and fate. He spoke so all could hear. Do not fear their numbers. What is a flock of sheep to a pack of wolves? We are the sons of the north, chosen of Odin, blessed of Thor, cunning of Loki. We do not flee. If we die this day, we die as men whose names will never be forgotten. And if we live, then even kings will tremble. His men struck their shields with axes and swords, their fear burning away, replaced with fury. The battle was joined. The Saxons surged, their lines thick as a forest. But Ragnar's men fought like mad wolves. Shield met shield, spear met flesh, and the cries of war shook the earth. Ragnar himself cut through the enemy like fire through dry grass, his axe a storm, his laughter a war horn. Yet numbers told. One by one his warriors fell, dragged down beneath the weight of the host. At last Ragnar stood alone, surrounded, his arms weary, his breeches torn and dark with blood and salt. Yet still he stood tall, eyes blazing. When they seized him, he spat in their faces and laughed. "Now you have Ragnar Lothbrok," he said. "But tell me, kings of England, what will you do when my sons come for you?" They bound him in chains of iron and brought him to King Ella, who sat in his hall like a vulture upon a corpse. Ella's eyes were cold as the northern sea. "At last," Ella said, "the wolf is caught. You who burned my land, you who slew my men, you who laughed at my oaths, Now you will laugh no more." Ragnar met his gaze, unflinching. "You think you hold me, Ella? No man holds Ragnar Lothbrok. You may kill my body, but my name will rise like smoke and choke you. My sons will come, and when they do, no church bell will save you." Ella gave a cruel smile. "Then let it be as the fates will. You shall die not by sword nor by fire, but by snakes." So they cast Ragnar into a pit deep and wide, its floor alive with serpents. Coils shifted like waves, scales glimmered, tongues flickered, and the air hissed with venom. The crowd watched in silence, horror upon their faces. Ragnar stood proud, though the snakes struck. Their fangs pierced his flesh, their venom coursed hot and burning. Still he lifted his voice, singing as the old skalds had sung, how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. His voice carried over the pit, fierce and unbroken, until the last breath left him. Ragnar Lothbrok fell, but he fell as a king, as a wolf, as a man whose name would never die. When word reached his sons, the world shuddered. Bjorn struck his shield until it split. Ivar's eyes burned with such fury that even those who feared him before now trembled. Sigurd and Vitserk swore oaths upon steel and blood. And so the great heathen army was born, greater than any fleet the North had ever sent. From fjord and forest, from hall and hamlet, men gathered, thousands upon thousands, a storm of iron and fire. They sailed to England not for plunder, but for vengeance, and vengeance they brought. Towns burned, kings fell, armies shattered. Ella himself was taken, and the sons of Ragnar showed him no mercy. They carved the blood eagle upon his back, tearing him open beneath the sky, his screams echoing across the land. Thus Ragnar's death birthed a war that drowned kingdoms. His sons carved their names upon England as he had foretold, and his saga became eternal. For though the man perished, the legend grew, carried by fire and steel, sung in halls for 1,000 years. And still the skalds say, Ragnar lives, not in flesh, but in song. In the crackle of fire, in the crash of waves, in the howl of wolves upon the winter wind, his spirit walks, laughing forever. After Ragnar's death in the pit of serpents, the wind itself seemed to howl his name across the whale road. In Denmark, the hearth of Aslog burned low, her dreams heavy with grief. When the news reached her, she stood silent for a long time, the firelight dancing in her eyes. At last she spoke to those gathered in the hall. So it has come to pass. The vision of serpents, the pit of death, the fall of the wolf. Yet though Ragnar is gone, his spirit walks in the breath of his sons. Woe to those who slew him, for the Norns themselves weave vengeance in the loom. Her sons stood before her, each a shadow of Ragnar, yet each different. Bjorn Ironside, broad as an oak, fists clenched until blood ran from his palms. I will split the skull of every English king until the seas run red. My father will not lie unavenged. Sigurd, snake in the eye, whose gaze bore the mark of worm and fate, whispered, The gods themselves will guide our hands. Ella will choke on his own blood. Vitserk, restless and fierce, struck his sword upon the floor. I will not eat nor drink until his death is answered with fire and steel. And Ivar, young, his legs weak, yet his mind sharper than Odin's spear, smiled a cruel smile. Let them think themselves safe, these kings of England. Let Ella kneel upon his throne and boast. We will come upon them with a storm they cannot measure, and we will teach them what it is to slay Ragnar Lothbrok. Aslog nodded, tears shining, but pride in her voice. Then go, my sons. Call the jarls, call the warriors, call every man who ever bent the knee to your father, every man who seeks silver, every man who seeks blood. The North shall rise. And rise it did. From fjords and forests, from icy shores and smoky halls, men gathered at the summons of Ragnar's sons. The skalds say never before nor after was there such a host. Ships blackened the horizon, dragon prows snarling, sails fat with wind. The sea groaned beneath the weight of oars, and the gulls shrieked, as if warning the world of the storm to come. The English looked upon it with dread. From their towers and cliffs they saw a fleet greater than any ever known. Priests prayed day and night, bells rang without ceasing, and the kings quarreled in their halls, fear gnawing their hearts. King Ella in Northumbria grew pale when he heard the tidings. Yet still he boasted, I slew the wolf, and I shall break the cubs. Let them come. My spears are sharp, my shields many. Northumbria shall stand, but the gods had woven another fate. The great heathen army swept upon England like wildfire. Towns burned, villages fell, and those who resisted were cut down without mercy. Churches fat with gold were stripped, their crosses torn, their relics stolen. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of the dying. At the head of it all rode Ragnar's sons, each as fierce as a storm. Bjorn's axe never tired, Sigurd's gaze chilled men to their bones, Hvitserk's fury struck terror wherever he marched. And Ivar, though carried upon a shield, his legs useless, guided the host with a mind as sharp as winter ice. It was Ivar who whispered strategies no man could match, who feigned retreat only to lure enemies into traps, who struck where the foe was weakest, who sowed fear like a farmer sows seed. The Saxons began to murmur that he was no man, but a demon, a sorcerer, a child of Loki himself. At last the sons took York, that proud city, and there they made their seat. From its walls they looked out upon the green fields of England, now black with smoke, and they knew Ella's hour had come. Word reached Ella. York had fallen, the sons of Ragnar held it, and they summoned him to meet them or be forever shamed. So Ella gathered his host, spears bristling, shields high, and marched to York. The city's gates stood open, as if abandoned. His men cheered, thinking the heathens fled. But Ivar had laid his snare well. Once Ella's host poured into the streets, the gates slammed shut, and from every alley, every hall, every shadow the Northmen leapt. The slaughter was terrible. Northumbrian blood ran in the gutters. Ella was seized, bound in chains, and dragged before the sons of Ragnar. Bjorn stood first, his voice a roar. "Here is the crow who slew our father. Here is the coward who cast him to snakes. What say you now, Ella?" Ella, though pale, sneered. "I slew Ragnar, I. He burned my land, he slaughtered my men. He was a wolf, and I cut him down." Then Ivar leaned close, his eyes gleaming. "And now the wolf's sons are here. You did not slay Ragnar, Ella. You gave him immortality, and now you will feel what it is to be hunted." They bound Ella upon the ground. His arms were stretched wide, his chest bare. With sharp blades they cut into his back, carving through flesh and bone. His ribs were spread like the wings of an eagle. His lungs pulled forth, and his screams rose higher than the church bells of his land. Thus did the sons of Ragnar give him the blood eagle, and thus was their father avenged. When it was done, the sons stood over his corpse. Bjorn raised his axe to the sky. "Father, do you hear us? Your death is answered." And Ivar whispered, "This is only the beginning." For the great heathen army did not disband. It swept across England, shattering kingdoms, humbling kings, and planting the banner of the raven in fields that once knew only the cross. And so the prophecy of the seeress at Ragnar's birth was fulfilled. This child shall rise on the storm, and the north shall sing his name. Wolves shall fear him, kings shall curse him, and his sons shall carry his wrath across the sea. The wrath had come, and it was endless. The years after Ragnar's death were an age of endless sails upon the sea. Never before had the whale road groaned under such weight of timber and iron. Never before had so many spears gleamed beneath the sun. The sons of Ragnar, bound together by their father's death, and yet torn by pride and hunger, carved their vengeance not only in Northumbria, but across all the isles of the west. In Mercia, they swept through fields and towns with a fury unmatched. The Saxon lords fled before them, some bending knee, others falling with sword in hand. Great monasteries burned, their bells silenced, their books and gold carried into the dragon-proud ships. Smoke hung over the rivers like storm clouds, and the people whispered that the very wrath of Thor had come upon them. In East Anglia, a Christian king named Edmund stood against them. He would not yield, and when Ivar demanded his submission, Edmund lifted his cross high and said, "I have one Lord, and it is not you." Ivar, cold as the winter sea, ordered him bound to a tree and filled his flesh with arrows until he was more hedge than man. Thus died Edmund the martyr, and his blood fed the tale of Ragnar's sons as much as their fathers. To the Northmen he was but another foe fallen, but to the Christians he was a saint. Yet though the sons ravaged the land, unity was never their gift. Bjorn longed for new horizons, for lands beyond England's shores. Sigurd wished for order, for a kingdom to endure. Hvitserk's temper clashed with his brothers, and he drifted, restless and wild, a sword ever in search of an enemy. And Ivar, always Ivar, ruled like a shadow, his mind sharper than all their blades. Men obeyed him out of fear, for though his body failed him, his will could break steel. It was said that in these years, Ivar spoke often of his father. When the war host gathered in camp and silence fell between the feasting and the fighting, he would speak into the fire. Ragnar laughed in the pit. He laughed, though he knew death was certain. Tell me which of you can laugh when your doom comes? Which of you can meet fate as my father did? None answered, for though they were sons of Ragnar, none were Ragnar himself. His shadow lay long across them all, and they knew they were sparks cast from a greater fire. Still, the dragon-proud ships came and came again, and England staggered beneath the weight of steel. It was the greatest storm of the north, and it bore Ragnar's name. The fury of Ragnar's sons did not burn out quickly, nor did it sweep across England in a single season. No, it was a slow and grinding storm, a campaign of years where the clash of steel and the thunder of hooves became the music of the land. When the heathen host marched, it was like the movement of the sea itself. Countless oars pulled the great longships across the whale road, their prows biting into the foam. Ravens circled above, for they knew well that where the sons of Ragnar went, there would be carrion enough to glut them 100-fold. The banners flapped in the wind, the black raven of Odin, the white serpent of Sigurd, and above them all the memory of Ragnar's own laughter. Mercia was the first to buckle. King Burgred fled before the storm, abandoning his people to the axe. The Danes claimed his throne, setting their own jarls to rule in his place. Vitzerk's hand was heavy upon the land, his fury staining river and field alike. Yet the Mercian lords who bent the knee whispered that even in their ruin they fared better than under Ivar, whose cruelty was a forge with no quenching. East Anglia followed. There, Ivar showed no mercy. King Edmund, pierced with arrows like the martyr he became, was laid in the earth, and his people sang hymns even as they bled. "He is a saint," they cried, "and his blood will rise against the heathen." But to Ivar such words were no shield. His mind was steel, his heart cold iron. "Your God may save your souls," he said, "but he cannot save your flesh." Still the storm was not without cracks. Bjorn Ironside, restless as the tide, looked ever outward. "Why chain ourselves to one land," he told his brothers, "when the world is wide and the south rich with gold? France, Spain, even Rome itself. There is glory enough for us all." Yet Ivar sneered at him, his eyes glinting like chips of ice. "The wolf does not chase every deer, Bjorn. He hunts the one before him and tears out its throat. England is our hunt." The brothers quarreled often, but blood still bound them, and so the host marched west into Wessex, the last and fiercest of the Saxon realms. There they met Alfred, a king unlike others. Young yet cunning, he fought not only with the sword but with patience. He struck the sons in ambush, faded into the woods, starved their men with long campaigns, then rose again with the spring like the green shoots from the frost. It was in Wessex that Ragnar's sons learned fear. Not of death, no Viking feared that, but of defeat, of shame, of falling short of their father's shadow. Around the campfires, the warriors spoke of Ragnar in hushed voices. "He laughed in the pit," they said. "Will we laugh when Alfred takes us?" Ivar heard them, and his fury was terrible. He ordered men whipped for speaking Ragnar's name with doubt. "My father's blood flows in me," he declared, his voice like iron striking stone, "and so long as I draw breath, England will know no peace." But fate is a wheel, and even the sons of Ragnar could not hold it still. Their armies won battles, aye, and they burned towns, aye, but Alfred endured. He built fortresses of stone and earth, bastions the Northmen could not crack. He made ships to match the longships, and for every monastery lost, he raised a church anew. The storm that had seemed endless began, slowly to scatter. Bjorn left at last, sailing south with his share of men, his sails bound for the warm seas. Sigurd returned to Denmark, drawn by the call of crown and kin. Vitzerk wandered, his rage unquenched, seeking foes wherever he might find them. And Ivar, the boneless who had bound them all together, grew ever more a shadow of himself. His mind was keen still, but his body betrayed him more with every passing year. His warriors began to whisper, just as they once had of Ragnar, "He is mortal after all." Yet still the Saxons remembered Ragnar in fear. For every time the raven banner rose upon the hills, they saw not only the sons but the ghost of the father. Ragnar had sown terror so deep that even in death he reaped it still. The years rolled on like the endless tide, and with them the storm of Ragnar's sons began to fade. No host, however mighty, can hold the field forever. The dragon-prowed ships that once blackened the horizon were scattered now, some to Ireland, some to Denmark, some to distant lands whose names were strange upon northern tongues. Yet the scars they left upon England, upon France, upon every shore they touched, those would endure for generations. Bjorn Ironside, the wanderer, became a king. His sails had brushed the coasts of Spain. His prow had tested the walls of Rome itself. He returned to Sweden not as a raider, but as a ruler, his fame so great that men bent the knee willingly. He grew old upon the throne, his hair silver as the moon, but even in his last winters he dreamed of the sea. Skalds say that when death came for him, he rose from his bed, grasped the tiller of an invisible ship, and steered it toward the setting sun. Sigurd, snake in the eye, held Denmark with stern hand. His mark, the serpent curled within his eye, was taken as a sign from the gods, and his people believed his gaze could pierce to a man's very soul. He ruled long and well, binding together jarls who might otherwise have torn the land apart. His kingdom was strong, his people prospered, and though he lived in the shadow of Ragnar, he made a name that stood beside his father's, not beneath it. Hvitserk wandered ever. His heart was fire, but fire cannot be bound. He fought beside his brothers, then apart from them. He raided Francia, struck at the Rus, and vanished into the east, where the rivers are wide and the forests endless. Some say he died in the service of foreign kings, his sword forever thirsty. Others say he returned at last to Denmark, weary and broken, and there drank himself into oblivion. Whatever the truth, his saga ends in shadows, as restless and untamed as his life had been. And Ivar the boneless, whose mind was sharper than any steel. He outlived many, clinging to power with the strength of his will alone. In Ireland, he was a king of kings, feared by Norse and Gael alike. Yet his body betrayed him as it had from birth. Each year brought him more pain, more weakness, until at last his men carried him to battle on a shield, too frail to walk, too proud to yield. The Skalds tell that when death came, he faced it not with laughter, as Ragnar had, but with silence, his eyes cold as the northern sea. Some say his bones were buried in England, cursed so that no man might disturb them without meeting ruin. Others say he was laid in Dublin, where his mound still rises, a hill of grass hiding a serpent's heart. Thus passed the sons of Ragnar, their names etched into the memory of men. But it was Ragnar himself, always Ragnar, who outshone them all. His sons avenged him, aye, and carved kingdoms from the bones of their enemies, but their deeds were forever tied to his. It was Ragnar's death that lit the fire, Ragnar's laughter that echoed across the seas, Ragnar's shadow that stretched from the snake pit to the ends of the earth. And in the halls of the north, where the fires crackled and the mead horns passed from hand to hand, the Skalds sang of him. They told of the boy who longed for glory, who donned the hairy breeches and slew the beast. They told of the warrior who raided with cunning, who won and lost shield maidens, who defied kings and toppled kingdoms. They told of the father whose sons became storms upon the world, and they told above all of the man who met death not with fear, but with laughter. For what greater gift can a man give the world than to live so boldly that his name never dies? Ragnar Lothbrok did not fade into silence. He became legend. His tale leapt from fire to fire, from fjord to fjord, until even lands that had never seen a longship trembled at the sound of his name. And the gods themselves, so the Skalds say, welcomed him into their hall. Odin rose from his throne, one-eyed and grave, and offered him a seat among the Einherjar. Thor clasped his arm, calling him brother of battle. The Valkyries poured him mead, and Loki, sly and smiling, whispered in his ear. And there in Valhalla, Ragnar sits still, feasting and laughing, his voice rolling like thunder, waiting for the day when the wolf swallows the sun and the last battle is joined. So raise your horns, warriors of the north. Drink deep, for Ragnar Lothbrok lives wherever men seek glory, wherever steel bites, wherever fate calls a man to stand and laugh in the face of doom. His saga is ended. His name is forever.